call to order the meeting, the policy meeting of Mount Lebanon School District is January 8th at 6:45 p.m. Present are Mr. Todd Hoffman, Mrs. Erin Gensel, and Mr. Jake Weiland. Did I mention audience members too? And in the audience, okay. And as well as Mr. Tom Peterson and Dr. Melissa Fries, and then Dr. Shulo, sorry, and then Dr. Ron Davis. And we are going to review two policies today. Policy GE, which is nepotism, supervision, and evaluation of staff, and policy GDFAB, which is reporting arrests and convictions. So starting with policy GE, Mr. Peterson, there are just some red lines and some revisions. That's correct?
Yes, and Dr. Davis can go over some of the changes. They're all just stylistic.
Yeah.
For instance, we used to have the title of associate superintendent. We don't anymore. So it just sort of updates the language that is used now in terms of describing the administration. The gist of the policy is that family relatives of board members and central administrative executive personnel are not eligible for employment in Mount Lebanon. There are some exceptions. Our policy is actually a little broader than what the school code requires. The school code focuses on professional staff, but the board many years ago decided that it should really apply to all employees, and it does. And although I can't recall it coming up, if a situation arose though where it was a very hard to fill position, then the relative can abstain, and if the rest of the board votes affirmatively that the need is great enough that person should still be hired, then the board can proceed with the hiring. There's another section in here that relates to situations that we have had where the family relationship occurred after both people were employed. For instance, a school board member who is elected to office who has a spouse or child who's already an employee here, that does not violate the policy, because obviously that person's role as a board member had no impact on the person's hiring in the first place. But we do have rules then where there won't be direct supervision of any family member. One of the other changes just is to further pin it down. We included nieces and nephews. But again, I don't really recall there being, Ron, I don't know if you do, recall there being a board vote on one of these exceptions. And this came up because of timing, correct? It was time, if there wasn't as though there was an issue, it was just time to review it. But
yeah, correct. So there hasn't been an issue. You're correct. When we looked at this, we looked at not only trying to update some of the language in terms of titles that are existing in the district, but also to use the more inclusive language that we're trying to embed into all of our policies. So you'll see those changes in here as well. You've already talked about the one substantive changes that your office embedded, which is the nieces and nephews piece. You indicated that was in code that we needed to add, and so the rest of it really is just some language updates to make it more inclusive and reflective of some of the current titles that exist in the district.
That's great. Do we have any questions, Mr. Weiland or Mrs. Gensel?
I do not have any questions, thank you.
Perfect, then we can send this to the board for approval during the voting meeting in 2 weeks. And then moving on to policy GDFAB, reporting arrests and convictions.
yeah, and again, Ron, I assume this just came up because of time.
Correct.
So this is a policy that's based on a portion of the Safe Schools Act that places the affirmative duty on employees to notify the Department of Human Resources in the event that certain criminal or child abuse occurrences have occurred. And the only real change here is that the first paragraph that you see added there in the lighter color is essentially a more detailed statement of the second paragraph. What we wanted to capture, though, is that to make it abundantly clear that if there is a second arrest for the same offense, it also has to be reported. And as we read it, every time we look at one of these, we think, well, maybe this could have been a little better than last time, and we thought that that would be a good loophole to close. And other than that, there's really just one very minor stylistic change.
We can't extend this to board members to be included in this policy too.
Well, it's certainly not required by the school code because it relates to employment. So if the board wanted to adopt something above and beyond on its own, it could. But here we're simply trying to comply with the school code.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Any questions, Mr. Hoffman?
No questions.
Mr. Weiler?
Nope, no, thank you.
Perfect. Well, these look great. Thank you so much. We'll move these both on to the voting meeting.
Great, thank you so much.
Any questions from the audience? Perfect. Well, great, then we will conclude this meeting, adjourn this meeting.
Yeah, just ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, Ian?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Power of the gavel. Very intimidating.
Right.